Happy Tuesday, everybody. We're on to the first community deck tech for Tarkir. And usually I'm going to try to do these about every 2 weeks. So next week, look for the community deck tech in the community tab if you would like one of your decks reviewed. So I do have a game of Commander that I'm really excited to get to, where I'm going to be playing some Field of the Dead with Tival. And so I'm really excited about that, but it is in like 20 minutes, so I've got to record this and like get this done. So here we go. All right, so there were 6 submissions, and I cover 4 each time, and it's a lottery style. I assign a number and use a random number generator to pick who's going to get reviewed. So sorry, Houston Vance, I did like your domain /Azur Bant kind of control deck that you submitted. And Cloaked Phantom, your Teamer Dragons, I'm really excited to hopefully get to talk about them. So if I didn't cover them, I encourage you to submit them again in a week from today. And hopefully we can get around to kind of talking about them. And obviously you can, show me what you've done with them since then. And or you can always become a YouTube member, and that's one of the perks, right? And okay, so first up here, we've got Jay Sather, who did a Orzhov Lockdown or Sarah Paragon deck. And we've seen, this archetype before, and a lot of the cards are kind of the stock cards that we see in the archetype. First thing I'd like to talk about is the lands. I always start with the lands. So you're running 24, and in best of 3, I would be on 24 as well. So I like that. You have 14 sources of untapped black mana on turn 1, and just for people who are new to Magic the Gathering or interested in deck building on their own, the single pip, like one black pip like Spiteful Hexmage wants 14 untapped sources, and you have 14, so you're good there. And then you have 21 white sources and 21 black sources, including tap lands, and one double pip like Temporary Lockdown or one double pip like Liliana wants 18, so you're good there, right? So overall, the mana base looks good. Notably, it's a little high from what I've seen for the Sarah Paragon decks. Usually only run 1 to 2 of these, so you're going for a full playset. Seems like maybe you have a little bit too much of this going on in the deck. Something to try. You may want to drop 2 copies here. Similarly, Sheltered by Ghosts, this one, is a little bit high for best of 3. It's better in best of 1 to have more Sheltered by Ghosts. And, maybe you were anticipating a lot of aggro matchups, where the Sheltered by Ghosts then help out, right? Unholy Annex, you drop this one down to 2. We usually see this one at 3 to 4, and that's fine. I think that this one is actually kind of awkward at times in the archetype. And then you also dropped 1 copy of Liliana. We usually see this at 2 to 3. Nurturing Pixie is at 3. I want to see this at 4 because this is kind of like the cornerstone of the deck, is using the Nurturing Pixie and the Sun Pearl Kirin to bounce things. So if it was my deck, what I would do is I'd take the Nurturing Pixie up to 4, and then same thing with the Temporary Lockdown, because the whole point of this deck is to play the Temporary Lockdowns and loop them, right? And so being able to get all 4, this is what you want to be doing on turn 3, right? And so I would definitely consider getting the 4th copy of the Temporary Lockdown in. As far as like what I cut to make those changes, I think your worst card in here is Spiteful Hexmage, and it's not that Spiteful Hexmage is bad, it's just that in the Sarah Paragon loop, you have to decide whether or not you're combo or if you're aggro, right? And if you're aggro, then you really want the Optimistic Scavenger, right? And you want more 1-drops to really maximize how much pressure you're applying, how quickly, right? And that's where Spiteful Hexmage is better, right? Is against the aggro, is to increase the clock of the deck. Works a little bit less so when you're bringing in these cards that are a little bit more grindy and value focused rather than pressuring your opponent, right? And so in this specifically, the Sarah Paragon build, I'm not sold on the Spiteful Hexmage. I do realize that you can pick up the Cursed Roll with the Sun Pearl Kirin. I just would take the deck in a different direction if you did want to include the Spiteful Hexmages. So hopefully that makes sense, right? Is kind of like what differentiates you from the aggro build of the black-white or the Orzhov Pixie deck, right? If you're going to bring in the Sarah Paragon, you're reducing some of your aggro potential. And considerations too that I think like another copy of a card that I think I would really get in here is Hopeless Nightmare. Hopeless Nightmare is a classic one that you can then sacrifice and then replay with the Sarah Paragon. You can bounce it and attacking their hand simultaneously while dealing damage to them. It's just a really good synergistic card for the archetype, so I definitely consider trying to get the 4 copies of the Hopeless Nightmare back in. Overlord of the Mistmoors is being explored too, so you have Overlord of the Baelmerk, but the white one that spawns the tokens works really well as a top-end threat, and so I've seen a full playset explored in this archetype. And then another one that also works with the kind of the Sarah Paragon loop is the Sun Blessed Healer. And the Sun Blessed Healer allows you to play it 1 and a white to play a 3/1 lifelinker that has a kicker for 1 and a white that allows you to bring something back from your graveyard. So it gives you kind of the similar Sarah Paragon synergies, but further down the curve, right? So that might fit into what you're trying to do here. Just something to consider. So thank you for the submission, Jay Sayer. I hope these comments find you well. Second up here, we'll talk about Sultai Control by Silent 9858, and this one, again, we're going to talk about the lands really quick. I would be on 25 in this archetype, not because of the curve, but because you're trying to play a deck that is really wanting to hit land drops every single turn, and you're on 25. So I agree with that. In best of 3, I might even go up to 26, right? I mean, so we see Control go all the way up to 27, rarely into 28. But if you're really needing to make a land drop every single turn, like Azorius Control prior to rotation was on 27 or 28 lands, right? So you could go even higher, but I think it's right on 25. You have 15 green sources and 1 CC, so the impending cost of the Overlord of the Hauntwoods wants 18, and a lot of your fixing for the other colors is also in green, so I would encourage increasing the amount of green mana in your mana base. You have 18 black sources, which seems a little bit too high to me because the hardest one to cast is Deadly Cover-Up with the 3 CC, and that one wants 15, so you could almost like take out 3 black sources and put in 3 green sources, and I think the deck would run better. You could do 16 black sources if you want to cast the Scavenger Regent for 2 CC. That would be technically a little bit harder to do than the Deadly Cover-Up. And then in that case, you would want 16 to be able to cast it 90% of the time. And so something to consider. You may want to tweak the land count a little bit. You also have 14 blue sources, and your Invasion of Arcavios wants 15, so you're 1 shy there. I don't think you need to play this on turn 5, though. And then if you want to play the 3 steps ahead on turn 3, you would need 18, and I think that's way too far for this deck to actually try to achieve, right? So really, I would just like probably keep this the same and go for the 3 more green sources, 3 less black sources, and see how it runs. As far as this deck goes, you've got a infinite loop. Technically, it's difficult to achieve, though. You have to have the Invasion of Arcavios on the battlefield and flipped, and then cast Doppelgang for X equals 3 and have 11 mana. Use the first copy to then copy the Invasion of Arcavios and 6 lands, which I think when you make the copy, it will come in unflipped. And then the second copy to make 9 lands, and then you'll have 15 mana available to loop infinitely, right? And Silent did say that they usually win off of the combo in 2 turns, so you're kind of doing like a big doppelgang to then set up doing a outrageous robbery where you then take their entire mill their entire deck because you just have so many lands. And so that works. You can use Invasion of Arcavios to then access your toolkit in your sideboard. Also, just for people who are trying to figure out how this deck works, Doppelgang, when you copy the Invasion of Arcavios, it allows you to get the Doppelgang that you just cast back out of your graveyard or out of your sideboard, right? So you can like loop the Doppelgangs with the Invasion of Arcavios. And then so you cast it to repeat the loop, and then you also continue to grab 2 spells of whatever choice you want from the sideboard. Now, 11 mana is a little bit of a tough ask, especially in a meta where you have Azorius Omniscience doing, crazy loops that are similar infinite loops on 4 mana instead of 11. But Sultai Control is always a vibe, right? It's always a fun time. So I would consider putting in a Founding of the Third Path. You do have a fair amount of spells that you can cast kind of off of that Founding of the Third Path, and you only need 13 blue sources to realistically cast it on turn 2. So the amount of blue mana that you have in here already would work for Founding of the Third Path. And the reason why I mention that is because if you're creating a huge amount of copies of the Founding of the Third Path, it will mill your opponent, I think, a little bit better than fetching the Outrageous Robbery on the following turn. So you might be able to actually get a mill 1-turn kill off of the Doppelgang, something to consider as an alternative win condition. Third up here is Boros Tokens by Queen Snoo Snoo, and I'm sure you're going to rework this one, since the downside is that it's been about a week since you guys submitted these to me. But that's why I try to give you enough thoughts that maybe we end up in the same place. But the because like if you look at like the regional championship that happened just recently, there were some Boros token builds, right? And I think a lot of the cards that I'm going to talk about were actually seen in the regional championship. I haven't actually gotten a chance to look at the decks yet, because I did the standard challenge instead of the regional championship for my review, which was a mistake on my part. But anyway, so we'll start with the lands. You're on 25 lands. I agree with that in best of 3. This one was actually a best of 1 deck, wasn't it? So I wouldn't tweak this off of the 25 lands. I think that you want to be hitting your land drops. You're not really trying to cheese it with anything like that, right? So you have 19 white. You don't have to worry about counting any of the 1-drops because you don't have any 1-drops. So the tap lands, you don't have to worry about that. You got 19 white. Again, 1 CC, like Split Up or the Temporary Lockdown wants 18, so you're good there. And then you have 17 red, and your the hardest one to cast would be a Braid, and that one only needs 13. So you have a little bit of an excessive amount of red sources. Just something to note. You may want to tweak white up 1 or 2, and then red down 2, just to make these double pips easier to cast if you want to cast them on turn 3. Now, there's a couple of suggestions that I put in the sideboard that I think I have been seeing a lot in the Boros token build. So Soul Partition, being able to exile non-land permanents, is a particularly handy tool if they're not... Because like the downside with running this many Wraths of Day of Judgment, Temporary Lockdown, and Split Up is like, what do you do when you're up against something that isn't that creature centric, right? Like Azorius Omniscience, right? These can end up being dead cards, and you have a lot. We don't usually see as many, 10 Wraths. You could probably drop it down just a touch. So Soul Partition, we usually see around 2 copies or so. Builder's Talent is being explored. It largely depends on if you're going to be playing the Collected Company that we got in white for the non-creature permanents. But there's a Builder's Talent build that could be worth exploring. Sunfall does actually make its way into a lot of these token decks. Being able to exile is decent to have, so you may want to try running like 2 Day of Judgments, 2 Sunfall. Depends on how much you're coming up against stuff that like the lack of exile is hurting you. Also, you get the body off of Sunfall, and you're running 25 lands, so you can kind of go up the curve a little bit. Beza is typically included, especially in this really aggro-heavy meta. Being able to stabilize with Beza is nice, 2 to 3 copies. Authority of the Consuls, if you're going to be running Split Up, Authority of the Consuls runs really well with that. And I guess I should be showcasing these, right? So Builder's Talent, this is the one that I was talking about with Builder's Talent. Here's Soul Partition, Sunfall, sure you guys are all used to that one. Beza, the Bounding Spring, and then Authority of the Consuls works nicely with the Split Up because it creates everything coming in tapped. And then we also have the old Archangel Elspeth. I don't think there's any reason to not run just like... If you're going to be running this many Wraths, you could lean a little bit into 2 more copies of Archangel Elspeth and Elspeth Stormslayer. I don't think you need to just have the one, right? could be something to explore. Again, just throwing out ideas, right? So 1 to 2 copies of Archangel Elspeth, I think, could make it in. And then High Noon is really well positioned right now, right? It shuts down the Quarry Steel Cutter. It is a problem for the Azorius Omniscience decks. It's not great for aggro in general that's looking to double spell. So, and that's where the Soul Partition comes in nicely, is that you can then use it to protect your High Noon and replay it once they go to finally destroy it. And I have to say, if you are in red, I get that you have the Abrades because of the Quarry Steel Cutter, but like Torch the Tower is one of the better instant speed interactions. You have a lot of things that you can bargain in this archetype. These are, I guess, more permanent than the Urbrask's Forge, which is traditionally the engine for this deck. So maybe your fodder is a little bit worse than what we typically see with the Urbrask's Forge for Torch the Tower. But it's certainly something to consider. Might be better than the Get Losts, right? Just something to explore. So thank you for the submission. I'm sure we'll be talking about Boros Tokens down the road because it did well in the regional championship. I think it made it in the top 4. All right, and Azorius Mill, or Azorius Enchantment Mill, right, by Steve Mann will be the last one that we cover today. And again, we'll start with the lands, and you're on 24. I think that's a little bit on the high side. So the more cards you have, like Feather of Flight, anything that's 1 mana or 2 mana that allows you to, or that triggers a draw, or allows you to cycle. Silent Hall Creeper, sort of like Emberheart Challenger. You can get additional resources because it has that draw trigger. Because of these, you can actually lower the amount of mana in your deck quite considerably. So with both of those, I would be on 20 lands in best of 1, or maybe 21, but certainly not 24. 24 feels a little bit high for this curve, right? And so that would be my first critique, is lower the land count a little bit. And then again, let's talking about your sources here. You have 21 white and 21 blue, 1 CC. I guess you don't have 1 CC in this deck, but it's important to talk about if you want to do something like Sheltered by Ghosts and hold up a white for Shard Mage's Rescue. That's why you want 18, so that it allows you to double spell a lot of the time too. So that's kind of like a magic number, and you're good. You've got more than plenty, right? And then the Mind Skinner is a little bit more usually reserved for mono blue, and that's because if you want to cast it on turn 3 90% of the time, triple CC, right, triple pips, they need 23 lands, and it's a lot to be able to cast this. Bloodletter of Akelzotz needs 21, and so it's very restrictive to run a card like Mind Skinner. And just so that you're aware, your likelihood of being able to actually cast this on turn 3 is below 90%. You do also only have 9 untapped blue sources on turn 1, so if you are planning to start your curve out with the Scrabbling Skullcrab, you're going to want to get those untapped sources up to 14 so that you can then do lines like the Skullcrab into the Hall Creeper. As far as the whole archetype goes, I would like to use this opportunity to ask Steve Mann, are you aggro, combo, or control? Because I feel like this deck is torn into 2 different directions. It's a cool idea, though, right? I see where you're going with it, because Veteran Ice Climber is a pretty tempting target to Voltron and make into something that's just ridiculously huge, and so that you can have this unblockable threat that's gaining you life off of Sheltered by Ghosts and milling your opponent equal to its power, right? You then also have the Mind Skinner, which has the enchantment synergies with the Entity Tracker, and every time an enchantment enters, your opponent mills cards, and then you've also got Jace, the Perfected Mind. So you've got your card draw, you've got like mill as an alternative win condition if the Voltron thing doesn't work out, right? You're shooting yourself in the foot a little bit, as far as like just the tip. Okay, the reason why I say that is because Sheltered by Ghosts is a lot better on turn 2 than it is further down the line, right? With the way that you have 9 untapped blue, you're not really planning on playing the Scrambling Skullcrab, and so when you go to play the Sheltered by Ghost, your opponent is going to have more of an opportunity to have interaction up or removal to respond to the Sheltered by Ghost and 2-for-1 you, right? So The Azorius Enchantments build that you see a lot of the times has like Optimistic Scavenger. I'm trying to think of other. It has other 1-drops in there so that you have more targets to hit with the Sheltered by Ghosts early on, right? And so by bringing in things like the Mind Skinner and the Jace, you're similar to the Orzhov Lockdown deck that we were talking about earlier. You have to think about when you're doing your additions, what you're doing to the tempo of the deck, right? And so the Mind Skinner and the Jace definitely slows the deck down, and in an archetype that doesn't want to be slowed down. It wants to snowball. It wants to go turn 1, turn 2 Sheltered by Ghosts, turn 3 Ethereal Armor. Now I have this indestructible thing that I can protect with my Shard Mage's Rescue, and I win the game, right? So typically when we see more of the mill strategy, this lends itself a little bit more to a controlling archetype where you need to have more answers for your opponent's threats. And especially with the entity tracker, like it's trying to go into more of a mid-game to late-game strategy. And it just feels torn in 2 different directions for me. So, but I see the synergies of what you're going. I see why you built it that way. It just doesn't work tempo wise for me, and maybe I'm being too harsh, but I'm not sold on it. So sorry, but I don't mean it in a bad way, right? This is all a learning process, right? It's something that sometimes you have a cool idea or a cool synergy, and then you don't think about how it's going to affect the rock paper scissors of the control combo aggro aspects, right? Like the tempo. So I hope this finds you well. I hope it, I always feel nervous about negative critique because I want it to be constructive, and I don't want to just like poo-poo your deck if you really like it, right? I mean, it looks like a really fun deck, and I don't know. I never know these if they're in more of a casual paper setting. Like I can imagine this being a really fun kitchen table deck, right? Or in the casual queues. So thanks everybody for your submissions. I will. Again, in a week, we'll open up the submissions again. If you would like to submit your own list, look for that a week from today. And I will see you all on Sunday for the best of one, for the best of one meta breakers. Take care, everybody.